Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Davis, and today we're going to talk about the humanistic and other theories of personality. And if you remember, humanistic really has to do with the human heart, and it's the most emotional component. Humanistic theorists basically emphasize that human potential was really kind of our way to get to self actualization and self determination. And it really focused on our personality be as a tool for healthy personal growth. And so humanists really kind of wanted to say our personality is always trying to go through different levels so that we can be the best version of ourselves, which should remind you of Abraham Maslow. Remember, we talked about his hierarchy of needs. So he was a humanist, and he basically thought our personality really kind of went along the hierarchy of needs, and it kind of helped us so that we could get through each stage of his hierarchy. So if we talked about self-actualization, which we've done before in the past, that's basically saying, okay, well, what happens when you hit self-actualization? And this is when we hit our fullest potential. And it's the individuals who we are able to have the best optimal psychological health, we're the best at functioning. We are the supreme achievers of the human race. And that's according to Abraham Maslow. And so characteristics of self-actualizing people kind of go along things that we've kind of not been, wouldn't surprise you, right? So things as they are good at being clear and efficient with their perception of reality, and they're comfortable with reality as it is. They have a continued freshness of appreciation of the world around them, the feelings of kinship and identification with the human race. They have ethical discrimination between good and evil, and they have a really good balance between polarities and personality. So Carl Rogers was another humanist that we've spoken about really briefly, and he had what was called the self theory. Now, according to Rogers, the self is basically what our consistent set of beliefs are, and the perceptions of ourselves. Basically, what do we think of ourselves? And we define that by our beliefs about ourselves. And if we have experiences that are inconsistent with our self concept, we begin to become threatened and anxious. So if you believe yourself to be a kind hearted person, and all of a sudden you do something that's really, really mean, you're going to feel really bad about yourself more so than if you view yourself as a mean person and do something mean. In those cases, you're just kind of like, well, whatever, that's who I am. So if we are well adjusted, we are actually able to understand that our self is constantly changing, and we modify our self concept. And Carl Rogers thought that we all had the ability to grow and develop as people, and our self concept can change. So there was the ideal self versus the real self. Now, the ideal self is the person that we want to be. We want to be kind, we want to be understanding, we want to be patient. And the real self is how much of that can you really do? How much of that is that really you? And then there's this area of incongruence. So if you look at this Venn diagram, this tiny space between the two is incongruence, and it's basically saying, okay, um, that's the congruent part of us. The incongruence is the differences between our real self and ideal self. So it's everything outside of this overlapping area. So then there was also what was called unconditional positive regard. And that means that all of us, we all really kind of just need to be loved and accepted. And we want to be independent from others, or we want that love and acceptance to be independent from how we behave. We just want to be unconditionally loved. So unconditional positive regard, unconditionally loved and accepted. And this would help us to have positive self regard from ourselves. Um, if we have positive regard that's not unconditional, and we have our conditions of worth, we actually begin to disprove or approve of ourselves more. So, a quote from Carl Rogers that I think is really great is, When you criticize me, I intuitively dig in to defend myself. However, when you accept me like I am, I suddenly am willing to change. And so what that means is if you are critical of somebody, they're going to say, "Nope, this is who I am. I'm going to stay like this." But if you accept them for who they are, they're more willing to go through that growth. So, have you had someone in your life who's accepted you unconditionally? And do you think this person helps you to know yourself and to develop a better image of yourself? Are you able to become a better person because you know this person loves you unconditionally or accepts you unconditionally? So, a little bit more about different theories of personality. We've talked about con- learning. And if you remember, B.F. Skinner was the one who kind of determined operant conditioning using his pigeons. And what he said was, well, wait a second. Our personality is determined by the environment and what we learn and the reinforcement that we have from our environment. So if we change someone's environment, we can change his or her personality. So that kind of goes along the lines of if we give positive reinforcement for good behavior, like giving a treat for good behavior, that means that their personality of doing good things is going to continue and increase. So that's one other theory about personality. Then we also have Albert Bandura. Now, if you remember Albert Bandura, he was the guy with the Bobo doll, and he had this social cognitive theory. And his views of behavior are influenced between the interactions of personality traits. So his thought was, okay, well, wait, if we see things going on around us, and we see that people are having certain types of reinforcement based on what we see around us, then our personality will change so that we can be more like those around us. So it's that social cognitive theory, basically meaning that um, we think about the world around us, and then we think about the social context, and that's how our personality is defined. So we conform. Then there's something called reciprocal determinism, and this basically says that the characteristics of the person and the person's behavior and the environment all affect one another in a two-way causal relationship. So our personal personality is, our behavior rather, is due to our environment and due to our personal factors. And our personal factors affect our behavior, and behavior affects our personal factors. Our environment affects our behavior, and our behavior affects our environment. And our personal factors affect our environment, and our environment affect our personal factors. So we are both the products and architects of our environment based on how we behave. Then there's something called self efficacy. Now, we've talked about self efficacy before, and this basically says um, that we can perform behaviors that are necessary, um, and the and if we believe that we can do it. So, self efficacy is the belief that you're able to do what needs to be done if you believe you're competent. So, Bandura, again, we're talking about the Bobo doll guy. He said, okay, well, wait a second. Self efficacy, the belief that we can perform tasks, is a major factor in how we regulate our lives. If we believe we can do something, we're more likely to behave in a certain way. So the higher self efficacy we have, so the more that we believe in ourselves, then we're going to do more things um, and try to take risks because we have a greater belief that we can master new situations and produce positive results. And we also are able to recognize that we can do it, but there might be a learning curve. So another social cognitive theory was Julian Rotter, and basically Julian said that people make choices that shed light on their personality. People engage in activities to achieve an outcome that will satisfy their psychological need. So basically, we have a certain belief about ourselves, and we're going to do whatever we need to do in order to satisfy certain psychological needs for ourselves. And he discussed the locus of control. And what the locus of control is that um, It's the degree to which we expect that a reinforcement or outcome of our behavior is going to affect our own behavior versus fate. So locus of control is the control ours, or is it out of our control? So an internal locus of control means that you will have control and you're responsible for what happens to you. The external locus of control means that you believe that other people are responsible, fate is responsible, luck is responsible, everything besides just yourself. So it's everything outside of your own control is what affects your life. So here, take a brain break. And if you think about who is responsible for your grade, some people are like, oh, well, the teacher didn't teach it very well. Well, what could you have done to learn the content better? And when you start thinking in that manner, you're more likely to kind of have an internal locus of control, which means that you believe that you can do whatever it takes to get you where you need to go instead of blaming outside things. So you learn not to blame others. So we've seen this. So we're going to watch a video real quick and about the personal control. So go ahead and watch this.
Whether you're 5, 15, or 50 years old, one of the hardest things to deal with in life can be exercising willpower and making a sacrifice in the short term in order to achieve something of greater value later. It's one of those commonly accepted life lessons. But now it turns out there are more organized efforts to teach it to children. Our economics correspondent Paul Salman has the story, part of his ongoing reporting, making sense of financial news.
Clap twice. Put up your right hand. Put up your left hand. Put up your right hand.
This is the KIPP Infinity Middle School in New York City's Harlem, where in addition to the 3 R's, these predominantly poor fifth graders study character to maximize success in later life. Qualities like grit and gratitude, optimism and curiosity, zest and social intelligence, and one skill above all.
What is this talking about? Don't eat the marshmallow. Brittany in the back. Self-control. Okay, so we're talking about self-control.
In fact, they've been talking about self-control since the first day of school, when teacher Layla Bravo Willie gave all of her students the marshmallow test.
They come in, they have a marshmallow in front of them, and they're looking around like, what is this?
This is among the most famous experiments in the history of psychology, with implications for economics.
In which a group of 4-year-olds were given one marshmallow and told that if they could wait to eat the marshmallow after being left alone with it for a while, then they would be given an extra marshmallow to eat. Most eat the marshmallow as soon as they are left alone with it, but some other children are able to resist temptation.
About 1 in every 3 is able to hold off. And YouTube is replete with videos of kids struggling to not eat the marshmallow. So what's the big deal about self-control?
The big deal about self-control is if you have it, you're able to actually pay attention to the teacher and to learn.
Psychologist Walter Mischel devised the marshmallow test 50 years ago, running it on hundreds of preschoolers at Stanford University. 12 years later, he found significant differences between those who had wolfed down the marshmallow. They were now found to be more easily frustrated, indecisive, disorganized, and those who, as tots, had been able to control themselves. They were now more confident, self-reliant, and get this, scored about 200 points higher on the SAT. The powerful economic message is that if you do exhibit self-control at an early age, says Mischel,
you've got a much better chance of taking the future into account and likely to have better economic outcomes. But the idea that your child is doomed if she chooses not to wait for her marshmallows is really just a serious misinterpretation.
Because the real message of his work is that self-control can be taught, says Mischel, to even the most out of control among us.
We get this feeling when we see a cookie on the plate. We want to grab it, want to eat it, only no can wait.
Cookie Monster's proverbial problems have been made quite graphic in recent years by imaging studies of what Mischel calls the brain's hot and cold systems.
The hot system is the limbic system in the brain. And it is reflexive, immediate, emotional. So in order to slow that hot system, you have to activate the cool system, the prefrontal cortex. The problem is that the hot system goes up when stress goes up. And when people are living under conditions of toxic poverty, those are conditions that create huge stress levels, and they make the hot system keep getting hot.
So, the earlier self-control is taught, the better, which is why Michelle teamed up with Sesame Street Workshop on a series of videos starring their guru of gluttony to teach tots how to delay gratification.
Me can take deep breath, me can self-regulate, me way.
But it's never too late to self-regulate, Michelle thinks. And so in the past few years, his ideas have inspired schools like KIPP, a nationwide chain of public charter schools serving low-income students, pushing high academic achievement.
This time we're going to try to make a goal that's very far away, right? We're going to try to make a goal around your report card.
Of course, older kids have self-control issues beyond cookies and marshmallows.
You are going to come up with everything that could possibly go wrong. Joshua.
Talking to my partner.
But you have to meet your goal. What are you going to do?
I'm going to pretend like they're invisible and I can't see them.
Use your imagination. I love it. Brendely, can you share what your if-then plan is?
That my family will be very distracting and I won't be able to read that much and it will affect my brain.
Okay, so if your family is super distracting, what are you going to do?
I will go to my room and close the door and put some headphones on and then start reading.
Give her 3 snaps.
Both Brenda Lee and Joshua, it turns out, ate their marshmallows the first day of school. But both have come a long way since.
For self-control, I just pretend it's a rock, like a poisonous rock, and just do it.
A poisonous rock?
Yes.
What does a poisonous rock look like?
I don't know. It's like a white rock with mold all over it. When I come to Cape, I realize that if I wait, I get a bigger treat.
And his self-control strategy also works on another problem, his temper. Are you easily annoyed?
Yes.
But did you learn here how to control your annoyance?
Yes. I'll just take a deep breath and just let it go.
Did you actually take a deep breath?
Yeah, but sometimes when I'm like really mad, I take 2 deep breaths.
Have you ever gotten so mad you needed to take 3?
Yes.
Yes? What's the most deep breaths you've ever taken?
I've taken 5 deep breaths.
When kids get to be 10, 11, 12 years old, their temptations begin to be some of their own feelings. For example, the feeling of anger, the rising of one's own temper, the readiness to hurt someone else because they have teased you or provoked you or made you feel bad.
And so that's why the KIPP schools are teaching kids as early as possible.
Exactly. The relationship between good behavior, good consequences, bad behavior, bad consequences.
Right now.
Most KIPP students are chosen by lottery, regardless of prior academic record. Almost all meet federal poverty guidelines. And yet 82% go on to college, and nearly half complete a 4-year degree, 5 times the rate of the average low-income student. What's happening to the kids you grew up with who never went to a KIPP school?
You know, they're not in school. They probably have their own kids at this point. You know, they're living a very hard life.
Even among successful KIPP alumni, George Ramirez stands out. Born and raised in the South Bronx, a mediocre student pre-KIPP, Ramirez is now a senior at Yale, majoring in history and physics.
I think one thing that I learned at KIPP really well is that a lot of your effort doesn't reap any success until way later in the future. There's another marshmallow if you wait just a little bit longer.
KIPP isn't the only path out of poverty, of course. Teacher Layla Bravo Willie also grew up poor long before KIPP began, yet she graduated from Harvard. But she teaches self-control these days, sharing her own adult economic struggles with her students.
You know that Miss Bravo had some issues with shopping. right? I like to shop, and I'm trying to save money. So if, for instance, I come across a store that I like a lot, I will pretend that that store has bed bugs. Yeah, then I won't go in.
Now, do you really visualize bed bugs in the store that attracts you, or that's just playing
No,
to the kids?
I really actually do. Whatever your marshmallow test is, there are always strategies that can help you. And we want to arm our kids with all the tools possible to be successful in life.
Tools that even the most recalcitrant can apparently learn. Paul Salman in New York and reasonably self-controlled for the PBS NewsHour.
So I want you to think about how you think you would do in some of those situations. Are you able to have self-control? Are you able to control your behaviors with understanding that there will be rewards later? And that's something that we all can work on a little bit in terms of developing that over time. So that's it for today. Go ahead and make your ideas meaningful, make those connections. I want you to do some deep processing and really reflect on your learning. And maybe take some time to think about where your self control is in these different humanistic thought process. I will see you tomorrow.